What's up, YouTube fam? Welcome back to the channel. I'm not gonna lie, right? With the current state of the market, it's getting tougher to make these types of videos, right? Because I know that the sentiment for everyone right now is just not a good sentiment. Like, yes, there are those few people who are trading and are shorting the market. But let's be real, majority of traders are still trying to long the bottom, right? So there's only that really small percent, a few people in the world of the markets right now that are actually benefiting from this. And it's from two types of people, right? There are people who are shorting the market, and there are people who are, of course, deep in cash and buying the dips. Now, there is a third layer of people, and that is us, right? Because right now, you might see that my account is down, but when it comes to assets that I'm perfectly fine with holding forever, that I know will eventually recover, I'm not really stressing. And the beautiful part is I have plenty of covered calls that are obviously profiting. That one, maybe not as much as these ones, right? Like, let's see. This one we got up 127. Here we're up 380. This one we're up 92. So, listen, in the end of the day, I like to say selling covered calls when the market is crashing like this, it's almost as if, you were at a restaurant, right, and there was bread on the table, and then someone took the bread off of the table, and then the crumbs fell on the plate, and all you had left to eat was the crumbs, right? That's why there's that old saying, option sellers, they eat like birds and poop like elephants. Because here's a good example, right? When your covered calls are winning, right, let's be real, here's another one. Did I roll this one already? Because I thought I had some bigger ones. I guess it just goes to show, right, when it comes to the covered calls, again, when you're looking at the profit, all of these winning trades, they aren't really much. I guess collectively they're maybe 5, 6, 700. I don't even know. Here, let's see. Let's make it simple for you guys, right? So between all of these covered calls, we're up 150, 240, 380, 760, 850, 9 something. That's not even a call. These aren't even calls. So let's say 8 or 900, right? And we're losing 2 to 3,000, a day on this account, right? So at the end of the day, covered calls are great only if the asset you're, in, you really love, or if your positions are already up, right? Those are the only two times where covered calls are going to be great. Now, what makes it awesome is the fact that it is an asset that we love. So, chipping away 800 at a time, 1,000 at a time, you do it 5, 10 times, and it does add up, right? It becomes 8,000, 10,000. And, then the market starts to recover, and then it all kind of makes sense, right? So I understand times like right now, it's not making sense for a lot of people. And it's because your time horizon is too short, right? So let's pull up the chart. And I do have actual bearish strategies, so make sure to stay till the end. But, if we pull up the actual NASDAQ chart, notice how we've had only so far, and I know it sucks to say this, only about a 10% dip from its top. Right? If we come all the way to, 2021, it came down 30%. We come all the way to COVID, and, it was a lot sharper, right, because there was actual reasons, but it came down 30%. So the reality is, when you actually zoom out and look at what the market's done, we've had two 30% drops in the last decade, right? So over the last 5 years, we've had two 30% drops. Right now, we've only dropped 10%. So, unfortunately, it can get a lot uglier, right? Because, this is the root of everything at the end of the day. The NASDAQ and the SPY, if you're not watching the NASDAQ and the SPY, then you just don't understand the markets, right? Because you're probably just watching the few stocks or the few crypto that you want to be involved in. And if you're doing that, then you're going to think there's something wrong with that stock or that crypto, right? At the end of the day, the only way you can actually get a gist of what's going on is by comparing it to the NASDAQ and the SPY. If the NASDAQ and the SPY are completely free-falling, then your stock or your crypto or your investment is going to fall as well. But if it's holding its own, then it's actually probably still a very good investment, right? And there's nothing you could do about it because at the end of the day, the market is everything, right? So, we've only came down 10%. We can still come down another 20%. So, with that being said, I'll show you guys what you could do, right? And here's a good strategy. So, obviously, there's poor man's covered calls. But if you're really so bullish, then you could actually do, poor man's cash secured puts, right? So, we're going to we're going to buy puts. And we're going to go deep in the money. And it's going to be the same concept, right, as a leap. So you buy a put Now, again, if you want to be safe, right? Like, notice how I bought this call that was deep in the money. Now, I'm down bad on it, but I still have another, 2 years for it to recover. And that's the difference, is long term, I feel more comfortable as a bull, which is why I'm not stressed, right? It's all about where you're at long term. So my point is, if you're so, mentally, scared, in the short term or even the long term, then you can buy a late put, or if you want, and if you're selling week to week puts, you can buy that same expiration. So let's just say hypothetically, you're still bearish on this market. You can buy this put for $745, and then you can go ahead and sell the same put for, $297. So now, in a perfect world, right, it comes down for the next 14 days, but it expires above, better yet, above 55.98, right? Expires above this and below 60.6. Now that's the thing, right? You realize when you buy these options how far it has to get for you to, be at break even. So, that's where it gets tough, and that's why, in my opinion, if I'm going to do something like this strategy, where, poor man's cash secured puts, I'm going to, take leaps. Why? Because then, in the short term, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, and that's exactly what's going on here. I'm down $1,700 on this position, but I've, at this point, collected $500, $600, $700 worth of covered calls. Obviously, you guys see I'm up $800 just this week on all my covered calls, but I've already collected almost a third of what this is down. Just selling calls against it. And again, we still have another, 22 months until this expires. So by the time this becomes worthless, I'd like to believe that I had collected, either a large amount of all the losses back in covered calls, or, in a perfect world, then the market recovers and this position's actually up. Now, getting to 102 is not going to be easy. I'm not going to lie. Like, getting to 102 by 2027. Listen, a lot of you are probably watching this and saying, oh, we'll definitely bounce. But again, you can't forget how long these bear markets actually last. And they're not that long. When you actually, if you've lived through them like I have, then you would realize this year, it goes by pretty quick. What was this? 3 months? It goes by pretty quick. And that's the thing. I wasn't making videos during these times. So it was a lot easier for me to just ignore the market. Now, I have a little bit more of a responsibility because I've been dropping content. There's hundreds of people who watch. Hundreds of people in the Discord, and ultimately I love the markets. I've been watching and investing and just studying the charts for years, and that's how I came to the conclusions of realizing these strategies make the most sense, because the more I tried to day trade, whether it was options or futures or crypto leverage, the more money I lost. But the more I had a longer time horizon and used advanced strategies like what we're using right now, the more I won. So it's like, I'll give you guys an example. I had a buddy of mine who bought let's just say he bought some calls 2 weeks out, right? So I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. So he already lost the position, right? But let's just say hypothetically you want to take a very similar position to what he took, right? And it'll all make sense. Give me a second. So he bought 2 contracts basically like this. And this was like 2 weeks ago. Now today they're expiring worthless. And, when he sent me a picture of the trade, I was like, dude, you're crazy. And here's the thing. I'm down on my portfolio right now 10 grand. But what I said to him, and this is the realization, this is how you know you've matured in the market. I was like, I would rather lose 10 grand the way I'm losing 10 grand than lose 1,500 the way you're going to lose that 1,500. Because when you lose money the way I'm losing money right now, you know that it's a temporary, it's a fake loss, right? But when you lose money that way, right, buying options 2 weeks out that expire worthless, that is a real loss. You are never getting that $1,500 back. $1,500. In this case, of this 10 grand, I can never lift another finger, and you can almost guarantee that both of these assets will eventually see new highs. And it could take months, it could take years. So, that's what's made me survive in the markets. That's what's made me successful in the markets, is having a longer time horizon on the correct assets. There was a time where I was trading meme coins, and, at first I was doing well. This was years ago, too. Like, I was trading meme coins before they were popular, back when people were trading them on Ethereum. And, I made a lot of money, lost a lot of money, and eventually when the bear market came, all of my meme coins got wiped out. So whatever little cash I had left, I put it back into real assets, right? Bitcoin, real altcoins. And then when the market did recover, I watched my portfolio recover very nicely. Now, did I make back all of my meme coin losses? No, but I made back all of the money I lost in crypto and then some. Had I stayed in those meme coins for the 3 years, I would not have taken advantage of the recent bull market over the last year. So that is what it comes down to, right? Is if you want to be successful in the market, it's deploying advanced strategies on assets you know you can trust, right? In this case, I'm collecting $800 against my losses. Again, that might be pennies compared to the 12K I'm down. But when it comes to buying the dip, you can buy the dip on the NASDAQ, even if we go down another 20%, right? When it comes to buying the dip, you can buy the dip on IBIT or Bitcoin, right? Even if it comes down another 20%. But guess what? If you're picking some random fart coin or some random stock, I don't have many of them on this list. Maybe HIMS. I don't know. Even HIMS is much better fundamentally than 90% of the stuff the kids are trading these days. But you get what I'm saying, right? If you're buying the dip on, something like this, then, you're probably never going to have a bounce. And even this, again, is still better than most of the things that people are trading these days. So, ultimately, these markets, something like Tesla, it's giving you all the volatility you need to be involved in a poop coin. And now, ultimately, when you include things like TSLL, which have, of course, been ruining my life, right? Again, it's like, why do you even need to be buying these random assets that you know nothing about? Like, all the volatility, all the fun in the world that you can possibly want, quote-unquote fun, right? Because, let's be real, losing in the market is not fun. There's nothing fun about losing in the market, right? At least, when you play a sports game or something else and you lose, all right, you still had a good time. In the markets, if you lose, there is nothing fun about it. Ultimately, just learning, right? And that's why, for me, I'd rather just win all ways around. I can close all of these covered calls right now, and my buying power will go up, $800, $1,000, and then do it again and again and again. And ultimately, doing that until my investments recover, to me, it might not be the fun way, but it's the safe way, and it's ultimately the way that's going to win in the long term. And 99% of these traders on social media who I see flexing all the shorts that they're catching are not actually making money. And that's why I'm not, to me, I've tried it already. I've tried to become that. I've tried to be the trader, right? I've tried to wake up every day and prepare myself for the market and be up by 9:30 and day trade and be at my desk. And for me, that's just not what I want to be doing. Like, for me, I want to be in assets I can trust. And then I want to just be getting in the action, right? Getting in the action as many ways as I possibly can. And ultimately doing it in a way where I could just know I'm always going to win. Like, I'd rather figure out how to get more money outside of the market to then deploy it into better strategies in the market than try to turn $100 into $100,000, right? Like, the reality is, if you're thinking you're going to day trade your way to from $100 to $100,000, good luck. But guess what? There's tons of businesses out there. There's tons of great jobs. There's tons of things that you can do to actually start making relatively solid money, have $100,000 in your account, and then deploy strategies like this. So ultimately, if you're stressing, I know we're going to get through it together. I promise. If you're selling options and you're doing stuff similar to like I am, there's just nothing you can do, right? This is just part of the business. Like, if you, like I said, have owned businesses like I have, you're going to get chargebacks, right? I remember, one of my businesses was a high-ticket dropshipping business, and, we sold a $10,000 hot tub to a customer, and he ended up charging back on it. And even though he had the item, he ended up winning the chargeback, which wiped out $10,000 worth of it was just a $10,000 loss on the business, right? It's literally the same amount as what we have right here. At the end of the day, when you choose an investment strategy, it is a business model. You need to look at it as though such. Right now is a time that it just sucks. You're going to get losses. You're going to get chargebacks if you would in business. And you just need to overcome it and hope that in the end of the day, the bottom line is profitable. That's it, right? The market, you're just sending your money to war. That is the business, right? It's just the money that's fighting on the battles. And guess what? Right now we're losing the front lines. Think of it like this Game of Thrones battle between bears and bulls. And right now the bears are advancing. But guess what? We have the leverage. We have the time. We can keep retreating until we get the ammunition and end up winning the war in the end. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this pep talk. I hope you understand that we are going to make it. I promise. It's not the end of the world. If you're not someone who is a content creator on the markets, then just stay away from the markets. It's funny because I understand at this point of how it works. When the market's going up, more people want to watch. When it's going down, less people want to watch. Listen, I hope this video is doing what it needed to do for you. I hope it's making you realize that we're going to be okay. But if I was in your position, I probably wouldn't even be watching anything myself. I would just look away. I remember the last time the market was crashing, which was in August, at least for crypto, right? I remember it was in, I'll show you guys real quick. Let's see. So basically it was 2020, with a higher time frame, right? 2024, where are we? Charts go by very fast. So right around this time, right? This time frame right here, when Bitcoin was down, you know, it wasn't even that big of a crash. It was relatively small, but I just remember the markets were crashing very hard, or at least it felt like it. And I remember I was away, and I just remember I deleted the apps, didn't even check them for a full month. And yeah, don't be afraid to do that, right? Have a longer time frame horizon. Don't be afraid to just detach, because when you're in these types of assets, it will recover. Obviously, if you're selling options and you want to detach, you know, check it once a week. You know, check it a couple times per week. You know, go further out of the money, further expiration. Just detach, because I don't want anyone here getting worked up over this, because, again, as long as you're deploying strategies similar to me, we're going to be all right. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a lot. Make sure to like, make sure to comment, make sure to subscribe. And I will see you in the next one. Also, if you don't understand what I'm doing, I put a free PDF, a free guide in the description. So if you want to learn the strategy in the simplest way possible, right? The simplest way to sell options, you know, ultimately, just to get you started, I put a free guide in the comments or in the description. Go check it out, and I will see you in the next one.